Every year, about 12 million people visit the Grand Canyon. Most of them take their photos at the South Rim, buy a t-shirt, and leave thinking they've seen one of the world's great wonders. They have. But they've only seen what we want them to see, what we allow them to see. My name is Ranger David Yazzie, and I worked at Grand Canyon National Park for 17 years. Worked, past tense. Because after what happened in September 2021, I couldn't go back. Couldn't look at those ancient rocks the same way. Couldn't pretend that the canyon is just a geological marvel carved by the Colorado River over millions of years. If you're watching this from Arizona, from any of the parks, drop a comment. But be careful what you share. The Park Service monitors more than you think, and there are things they don't want discussed. Things about the trails that appear and disappear. Things about why certain areas are restricted. Things about what the Hopi elders really mean when they call the canyon Ongtupka, the place of emergence. This is about the trail that doesn't exist. The one that's not on any official map, never has been, never will be. The one that only shows itself between 3 and 4 a.m. on certain nights. The one that leads down to places that shouldn't be there, to people who shouldn't exist, to answers that nobody wants to hear. And before you dismiss this as another campfire story, know this. I have the photos, I have the evidence, and I have the scars, both physical and mental, to prove every word I'm about to tell you is true. September in the Grand Canyon is perfect weather. The scorching summer heat has broken, but the winter snows haven't started. The crowds thin out just enough that you can actually appreciate the silence, the way sound travels across the vast space, the way the rocks change color as the sun moves across the sky. I'd been a ranger since 2004, and September was still my favorite time of year. I was working the Bright Angel Trail that morning, stationed at the 3-mile rest house, making sure hikers had enough water and weren't attempting more than they could handle. People always underestimate the canyon. They see it from the rim and think it's just a big hole in the ground. They don't understand that it's an inverted mountain, that coming back up is twice as hard as going down, that the temperature at the bottom can be 20 degrees hotter than at the rim. It was around 7 a.m. when I met her, Dr. Emily Vogel, a geology professor from Northern Arizona University. She wasn't your typical tourist. She had professional hiking gear, detailed topographical maps, and the kind of intense focus that comes from someone on a mission. "Ranger Yazzie?" she asked, reading my name tag. "I was told you might be able to help me. I'm researching some geological anomalies in the canyon." "What kind of anomalies?" I asked, though something in her tone made me wary. She pulled out a tablet, showing me a series of photographs. They were shots of the canyon wall, but there was something off about them. The rock layers didn't match the known geological sequence. Where there should have been Kaibab limestone, there was something else. A dark, almost crystalline formation that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "Where were these taken?" I asked. "That's the thing," she said, frustration creeping into her voice. "According to my GPS coordinates, they were taken right here, along the Bright Angel Trail. But when I came back the next day to the exact same spot, this formation was gone, just regular limestone. I'd heard stories like this before, hikers claiming to see caves that weren't there the next day, photographers capturing formations that didn't match any geological survey. Usually, we chalked it up to dehydration, altitude effects, or simple misidentification, but Dr. Vogel didn't seem like the type to make those mistakes. "Show me exactly where," I said. We hiked down about another half-mile to a section of trail between the 2-mile and 3-mile rest houses. She consulted her GPS, then pointed to a section of the canyon wall. "Right there!" The formation was right there, extending for about 30 feet. I looked where she was pointing. It was ordinary Kaibab limestone, the same cream-colored rock that capped the entire canyon. Nothing unusual about it at all, but as I studied it, I noticed something. A very faint discoloration in the rock, like a shadow that didn't quite match the angle of the sun. "What time did you take the photos?" I asked. "Early morning." "Around 3:30 a.m. I was doing some astrophotography and noticed it in my shots." 3:30 a.m. That detail stuck with me for reasons I couldn't explain at the time. "Dr. Vogel, can I get copies of those photos? I'd like to look into this." She seemed relieved that I was taking her seriously. We exchanged contact information, and she sent me the files that evening. I spent hours studying them, comparing them to geological surveys of the area. She was right. The formation in her photos shouldn't exist. It looked almost organic, like fossilized tissue rather than sedimentary rock. That night, I couldn't sleep. Something about those photos nagged at me. At 2:30 a.m., I gave up on sleep, got dressed, and headed to the Bright Angel Trail. I told myself I was just checking on something, satisfying my curiosity. But I brought my camera, extra batteries, and my GPS unit. The canyon at night is a different world. The temperature drops dramatically, and the silence is so complete it feels like pressure on your ears. The stars are brilliant, the Milky Way stretching across the sky like a river of light. But there's also something unsettling about it. The way the darkness seems to pool in the depths below, the way every sound echoes and distorts. I reached the spot Dr. Vogel had indicated at exactly 3:17 a.m. At first, nothing seemed different. The limestone wall looked the same as always. But then, as I watched, something changed. It was subtle at first, like heat shimmer in reverse. The rock seemed to ripple, to shift, and suddenly the dark formation from Dr. Vogel's photos was there, as if it had always been there. I took photos rapidly, my hands shaking slightly. The formation wasn't just different colored rock, it had depth to it, recesses that suggested an opening. I approached carefully, running my hand along the surface. It was cold, much colder than the surrounding rock, and it had a texture unlike anything I'd felt before, smooth, but with an underlying roughness, like glass over sandpaper. And then I saw it. What I'd initially taken for a shadow was actually an opening, a trail that led into the canyon wall. Not a cave, but an actual trail, with carved steps and everything, disappearing into the solid rock. I should have left then. Should have reported it, called for backup, done anything except what I did. But there's something about impossible things. When you see them, you have to prove to yourself that they're real. You have to follow them, if only for a few steps. I turned on my headlamp and entered the trail. The passage was narrow but navigable, carved from the same dark crystalline rock. The walls seemed to absorb my light, creating a bubble of visibility that extended only a few feet in any direction. The trail descended at a steep angle, switchbacking through the rock in a way that should have been impossible. According to all geological surveys, I was walking through solid stone. After about 50 feet, the passage opened into a small chamber. The walls were covered in petroglyphs, but not like any Native American rock art I'd seen before. These were more complex, more geometric, showing patterns that hurt to look at directly. And in the center of the chamber was something that made me stop breathing for a moment. Equipment, modern hiking equipment, backpacks, water bottles, a GPI unit, but covered in dust, as if they'd been there for years. I approached slowly, my light playing over the items. The backpack had a name tag, Marcus Webb, University of Chicago, 1987. 34 years ago. I pulled out my phone to take photos, but it was dead. Not low battery, completely dead. as if it had never been charged. My GPS unit was showing impossible readings, coordinates that placed me simultaneously at the rim, the river, and somehow also outside the park entirely. That's when I heard the voices. They were coming from deeper in the passage, faint but distinct. Multiple people talking in English but with an odd cadence, like a conversation being played at the wrong speed. Against every instinct, I moved toward the sound. The passage continued, descending more steeply. The petroglyphs became more numerous, more complex. Some showed human figures, but wrong, too tall, with too many joints in their limbs. Others showed the canyon itself, but inverted, as if it rose into the sky rather than descended into the earth. The voices grew clearer. I could make out words now. 17 more days until the window opens again. The ranger saw us yesterday. We need to be more careful. Time flows differently here. We age slower, but we're forgetting. I rounded a corner and found myself looking into a larger chamber, lit by a phosphorescent glow emanating from the walls themselves. And there were people there. A dozen of them, maybe more, dressed in hiking gear from different eras. 1950s, 1970s, 1990s. They were sitting around what looked like a camp, but everything about them was wrong. Their movements were too slow, too deliberate, as if they were moving through thick liquid. Their faces were gaunt, eyes sunken, but somehow they looked younger than their clothes suggested they should be. One of them, a woman in 1960s-era clothing, turned toward me. Her movement was so slow I could see each muscle in her neck engage separately. When she finally faced me, her eyes were black. Not the iris, but the entire eye, like pools of oil. "Another one," she said, her voice layered, as if multiple people were speaking through her. "The trail has chosen another one." I stumbled backward, my light swinging wildly. The others were turning now, all with those same black eyes, all moving with that horrible, slow precision. "You can't leave," another said. A man in modern gear who couldn't have been there more than a few years based on his clothing. "The trail only opens from the outside. From in here we can only wait. Wait for the window. Wait for the emergence." I ran, turned and ran back through the passage, their voices echoing behind me. "You'll be back. They always come back. The canyon calls, and you answer." I burst out of the passage onto the bright angel trail, gasping for breath. The eastern sky was lightening. I'd been inside for over an hour, though it had felt like minutes. I turned back to the wall, but the opening was gone. Solid limestone, nothing more. My phone suddenly came back to life, showing dozens of missed calls. My GPS unit recalibrated, showing normal coordinates, and the photos I'd taken of the entrance were corrupted, showing nothing but static. I stood there shaking, trying to process what I'd seen. Part of me wanted to dismiss it as a hallucination, altitude sickness, something. But the dust on my boots wasn't from the bright angel trail. It was that dark, crystalline material from inside the passage. I hiked back to the rim as the sun rose, my mind racing. I needed to research Marcus Webb, needed to understand what was happening. But more than that, I needed to decide whether to report this or keep it to myself. When I reached the visitor center, my supervisor, Chief Ranger Tom Harrison, was waiting for me. "Yazzie," he said, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk. Someone reported seeing you enter a restricted area last night." "There was no restricted area," I started to say, but he held up his hand. "My office." Now, as I followed him, I noticed something I'd never paid attention to before. A map on the wall of the visitor center, showing all the official trails in the Grand Canyon. But there were marks on it, very faint, that showed other paths. Trails that didn't officially exist. And one of them, barely visible, was right where I'd been that morning. Tom closed his office door and turned to face me. "David, how long have you worked here?" 17 years, sir." "And in those 17 years, how many times have you heard stories about trails that shouldn't exist? Caves that appear and disappear? Hikers who vanish without a trace? Dozens of times, but you always dismissed them, until now." He sat down heavily in his chair. "You found one, didn't you? You found a threshold." "A threshold? That's what we call them. Places where the canyon isn't quite right, where the normal rules don't apply." He pulled out a folder from a locked drawer, thick with documents and photos. "The Park Service has known about them since the 1920s, maybe longer. The Hopi and Navajo have known forever. They have protocols, rituals, ways of dealing with them. But we just try to keep people away." He opened the folder, showing me photos that spanned decades. Hikers with black eyes, impossible geological formations, and trails. Dozens of trails that appeared in photos but didn't exist on any map. "The one you found," he continued, "we call it the Emergence Trail. It's one of the oldest, shows up maybe 3-4 times a year, always between 3 and 4 a.m. And yes, people have gone in. Most don't come back out. The ones that do." He showed me another photo, this one of a ranger from the 1970s. His eyes were partially blackened, like someone had spilled ink into them. They're never quite the same. The people inside, we don't know who they are, or were. Some match missing persons reports. Others don't match anything in our records. Best guess? They're from different times, maybe different versions of reality, all stuck in the same pocket of whatever that place is. And we just leave them there? Tom's expression hardened. "We've tried rescue operations. In 1968, we sent in a full team. 12 rangers, equipped with everything we could think of. None of them came back. The trail sealed itself and didn't reopen for 3 years. When it finally did, we could hear them in there, still alive, still trapped. That was over 50 years ago, and sometimes, on quiet nights, you can still hear them calling." I thought about the voices I'd heard, the people I'd seen. The woman said something about a window, about emergence. Tom went very still. What exactly did she say? 17 more days until the window opens again. And something about time flowing differently. He grabbed his calendar, counting days. His face paled. 17 days from now is the autumn equinox. "David, in all our records, the trail has never been active during an equinox. If they're right, if some kind of window is opening..." He trailed off, but I understood. Whatever was in there might be able to get out. The next 2 weeks were a blur of research, preparation, and growing dread. Tom Harrison had assembled a small team of people who knew about the thresholds. Myself, 2 other senior rangers named Janet Morrison and Carlos Begay, and surprisingly an elderly Hopi elder named Samuel Tawahangva, who served as a cultural consultant for the park. We met in a conference room that I'd never known existed, hidden in the basement of the park headquarters. The walls were covered with maps, photos, and documents dating back to the park's establishment in 1919. Red pins marked known threshold locations. There were dozens of them. "The Emergence Trail is the most active," Tom explained, pointing to the cluster of pins near the Bright Angel Trail. "But it's not the only one. Hermit's Rest has one that opens during thunderstorms. There's another near Desert View that only appears when the temperature drops below freezing." Samuel Tawahangva sat quietly through Tom's presentation, his weathered face expressionless. When Tom finished, Samuel spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the weight of generations of knowledge. "Your maps are incomplete," he said simply. "You mark the places where your world touches the other world, but you don't understand the pattern." He stood, approaching the map with surprising agility for his age. The canyon is not just a hole in the earth. It is a wound, a place where the skin between worlds is thin. My people have known this since the beginning. We emerged from the third world into this fourth world through the Sipapu, the place of emergence. The canyon is full of Sipapus, doorways between worlds. The people I saw, I said, they mentioned emergence. They were waiting for something. Samuel turned to me, his dark eyes intense. The equinox is a time of balance when day and night are equal. It's also when the doorways are widest, if something is planning to emerge. He trailed off, shaking his head. We must prepare. Carlos Begay, who was half Navajo himself, had been researching the missing persons cases. I've found something, he said, spreading out files on the table. Marcus Webb, the University of Chicago researcher whose equipment you found. He wasn't just hiking. He was part of a geological survey team studying what they called temporal anomalies in the rock strata. His whole team disappeared in 1987. 5 people, all on the same night. September 22nd, Janet added, checking her notes. The autumn equinox. The pattern was becoming clear. Every major disappearance, every mass vanishing, happened during an equinox or solstice. The thresholds weren't random. They operated on a schedule tied to astronomical events. I spent the next days diving deep into the park's hidden archives. There were reports going back decades, each more disturbing than the last. A 1934 account from a ranger who'd found an entire civilian conservation corps team inside a threshold. Still alive, but aged only a few days despite being missing for 6 months. A 1961 incident where a family of 4 had walked out of a threshold speaking a language that linguists couldn't identify, claiming to be from a Grand Canyon that was still an inland sea. But the most disturbing find was a journal from 1923, written by the park's first superintendent. He described meeting a group of Spanish conquistadors who emerged from a threshold near Hopi Point. They claimed to have entered a cave in 1540 while searching for the 7 cities of gold. To them, only weeks had passed. Dr. Emily Vogel, the geology professor who'd started all this, had been conducting her own research. She'd discovered that the dark crystalline rock I'd photographed didn't match any known mineral composition. Under spectral analysis, it showed properties that suggested it wasn't entirely solid. It existed in what she called a phase state, simultaneously solid and liquid, present and absent. It's impossible, she told me over coffee at the El Tovar Hotel. This material shouldn't exist according to our understanding of physics. It's as if someone took rock and twisted it through dimensions we can't perceive. Someone or something, I corrected. She showed me more photos she'd taken with specialized equipment. In infrared, the threshold areas glowed with heat despite being cold to the touch. In ultraviolet, they showed patterns that looked almost like writing, symbols that hurt to decipher. There's something else, she said, lowering her voice. I've been tracking electromagnetic anomalies throughout the canyon. They're increasing. Whatever's happening, it's accelerating toward the equinox. As the days counted down, more strange incidents were reported. Hikers on the South Kaibab Trail reported hearing voices in languages they didn't recognize. A group on the North Rim claimed to have seen people in ancient clothing walking through solid rock. And 3 separate witnesses reported seeing the same thing. A figure standing at various viewpoints at 3 a.m., completely motionless, facing the canyon with black eyes that reflected no light. Tom made the decision to close several trails for maintenance in the days leading up to the equinox. The official story was rockslide danger. The reality was we were trying to keep people away from the most active thresholds. On September 20th, 2 days before the equinox, I made a decision that would change everything. I went back to the emergence trail. I arrived at 2:45 a.m., giving myself time to prepare. I'd brought climbing gear, emergency supplies, and something Samuel had given me. A small pouch of corn pollen and turquoise, traditional protections used by his people. At exactly 3 a.m., the transformation began. The limestone shimmered, shifted, and the dark, crystalline formation appeared. The entrance manifested like a wound opening in the rock. This time, I was ready for it. I'd attached a climbing rope to a solid anchor point outside, creating a lifeline back to the normal world. I entered the threshold. The passage was as I remembered, but now I noticed more details. The walls weren't just carved. They were grown, shaped like organic tissue turned to stone. The petroglyphs moved when I wasn't looking directly at them, rearranging themselves into new patterns. I reached the first chamber where I'd found Marcus Webb's equipment. It was still there, but now there was more. Dozens of backpacks, some modern, some decades old. Water bottles from the 1960s sat next to smartphones from the 2010s. It was a timeline of lost hikers, all their gear abandoned in the same space. The voices were clearer this time, coming from deeper in the passage. But now I could hear something else, a rhythmic pounding, like a massive heartbeat coming from below. I followed my rope deeper, marking my path with chalk. The passage branched multiple times, a maze of tunnels that shouldn't exist. In some chambers, I found more equipment. In others, strange formations that looked almost like furniture carved from the crystalline rock. And everywhere, those moving petroglyphs, telling a story I couldn't quite understand. Finally, I reached the large chamber where I'd seen the people. They were still there, still moving with that horrible slowness. But now I could see more of them. Dozens, maybe 50 or more, arranged in concentric circles around something in the center. It was a hole in the floor, perfectly circular, about 10 feet across. The phosphorescent glow was emanating from it, pulsing in rhythm with that heartbeat sound. And the people were dropping things into it, rocks, equipment, anything they could find. "You came back," the woman in 1960s clothing said, turning to face me with those oil-black eyes. "They always come back." "What is that?" I asked, pointing to the hole. "The way down," she replied. "The path to the third world, where we came from, where we must return. But the door is sealed. We feed it, hoping it will open. On the equinox it will be weak enough." "Feed it what?" "Time," another figure said, the modern hiker I'd seen before. "We feed it our time. We age slower here because our time is being consumed. The threshold takes it, uses it to maintain itself." I understood then. These people weren't just trapped. They were being used, their very existence fuel for whatever this place was. "How long have you been here?" I asked the woman. "I entered in 1962, she said. September 22nd, 1962. I was part of a geological survey team. We found the entrance. Thought we'd discovered a new cave system. But time works differently here. It's been days for me, maybe weeks, but outside." She gestured vaguely. "Outside, decades pass." "You could leave," I said. "The entrance is open. Just walk out." She laughed, a sound like grinding stone. "Look closer, Ranger. Look at what we really are." I stepped closer, my headlamp fully illuminating her face. What I'd taken for shadows were actually part of her. Her skin was partially transformed into the dark, crystalline material, spreading like veins from her black eyes. "We're becoming part of it," she explained. "The longer you stay, the more you change. We can't leave because we're no longer entirely human. We're threshold beings now, caught between worlds." Marcus Webb, I said. Is he here? I am Marcus Webb, a voice said from behind me. I turned to see a young man, couldn't have been older than 30, wearing 1980s hiking gear. Half his face was crystalline, one normal eye, and one black void. I've been here 34 years and 3 weeks, simultaneously. Time isn't a line here, it's a web, and we're stuck in it. The window, I said. The emergence. What happens on the equinox? The heartbeat sound grew louder, and all the threshold beings turned toward the hole in the floor. Something's been trying to come through, Marcus said. Something from the third world, the place before this one. The Hopi stories are real, but they're incomplete. Beings live down there, things that were left behind when humanity emerged into this world. They've been trying to follow us up, and the thresholds are the cracks they're trying to squeeze through. Every equinox, the barrier weakens, the woman added. We can feel it, hear them calling from below. This time feels different, stronger, like something big is going to happen. I backed toward the entrance, my mind racing. I have to warn the others. Warn them about what? Marcus asked. You can't stop it. The Park Service has been trying for a century. All they can do is hide it, cover it up, hope it doesn't get worse. There has to be something. There is, the woman interrupted. But you won't like it. She explained their theory. The thresholds were maintained by consumed time, by the life force of those trapped within. If that energy source was disrupted, if the threshold beings were freed or destroyed, the passages might collapse. But doing so would mean sacrificing everyone trapped inside. 50 people, at least, Marcus said. From across a century, all of us would have to die to maybe seal one threshold, and there are dozens throughout the canyon. I left then, following my rope back through the twisted passages. As I emerged onto the bright Angel Trail, the sun was rising, painting the canyon in shades of gold and red. The entrance sealed behind me, becoming solid rock once more. But I could still hear them, faint, like an echo, but persistent. The voices of the threshold beings, counting down to the equinox. And beneath that, something else, a deeper sound, a calling from below, growing stronger with each passing hour. I had one day to convince Tom and the others that we needed to take drastic action. One day before whatever was in the third world tried to emerge into ours. When I reached the rim, Tom was waiting for me with Samuel and the others. Their faces were grim. We know, Tom said simply. The instruments have been going crazy all night. Seismic activity that doesn't show up on standard equipment. Electromagnetic spikes. And David... He paused, struggling with the words. 15 more people have gone missing since yesterday. Not just in our park, Zion, Bryce, even Monument Valley. They're all reporting similar incidents. Samuel stepped forward. The emergence is not just here. It's happening across the sacred lands. Whatever is coming through, it's not trying to enter at just one point. It's a coordinated breach, Janet added, showing us a map with red marks across the southwest. Every known threshold site is showing activity. We had less than 36 hours to figure out how to stop something that had been building for perhaps thousands of years. And the only people who might have answers were trapped in a place where time had no meaning, slowly turning into something inhuman. September 21st. One day before the autumn equinox. The Grand Canyon was closed to visitors for the first time in its history outside of government shutdowns. The official story was a severe weather warning combined with rockslide risks. The reality was that we were preparing for something unprecedented. The command center had been set up in the basement of the park headquarters, where monitors displayed feeds from cameras positioned at every known threshold point. The electromagnetic readings were off the charts. Seismographs detected constant micro-tremors that originated from impossible depths, far below where the canyon floor should be. Dr. Vogel had brought in equipment from NAU, devices that could measure quantum fluctuations and dimensional stress. The fabric of space-time is literally stretching, she explained to our assembled team. It's like the universe itself is developing stretch marks around these threshold points. Samuel Tawahangva had called in other tribal elders, Hopi, Navajo, Havasupai, Hualapai. They gathered in a circle, discussing in languages that predated European contact. When they finished, Samuel's expression was grave. "Our ancestors knew this day would come," he said. "The stories speak of a time when the doors between worlds would weaken, when the things left behind in the third world would try to rise. We sealed them once, long ago, but seals don't last forever." "How did your ancestors seal them?" Tom asked. "With sacrifice," Samuel replied simply. "Willing sacrifice. Warriors who entered the thresholds and gave their life force to strengthen the barriers. But that was when the doors were smaller, fewer. Now," he gestured at our map with its dozens of red pins, "now we would need an army of volunteers." Carlos had been coordinating with other parks. The news wasn't good. Zion reports 7 rangers missing. They entered a threshold near Angel's Landing and haven't come back. Bryce has lost contact with the research team, and there's something else. Tourists have been posting videos online. Strange figures in the canyon at night. Lights moving through solid rock. The cover story isn't holding. Janet pulled up social media feeds on her laptop. The videos were going viral. Shaky phone footage of dark figures with glowing eyes. Time-lapse photography that showed the canyon walls shifting and changing. And in several videos, the same figure, tall, impossibly thin, standing at the rim with arms spread wide, facing the canyon. "Who is that?" I asked. "We don't know," Tom admitted. "But it's been spotted at 12 different locations in the last 6 hours, always at threshold points, always at exactly 3 a.m. local time. I studied the figure in the videos. There was something familiar about its posture, the way it stood. Then it hit me. That's not a who, that's a what. It's one of them, a threshold being, but it's outside." The room went silent. "That's impossible," Janet said. "You said they couldn't leave." "They said they couldn't leave," I corrected. "But what if they were wrong? What if the transformation isn't what's keeping them in, but what allows them to eventually get out?" Dr. Vogel was already pulling up her measurements. The electromagnetic signature from that figure. It's identical to the threshold readings, but mobile. It's like a piece of the threshold broke off and started walking around. Samuel stood abruptly. "If they can leave the thresholds, if they can walk in our world while maintaining their connection to the other world, then they're not trapped. They're scouts." "Scouts for what?" Tom asked, though we all knew the answer. "For whatever's coming through tomorrow," I said. That night, I couldn't sleep. At 2 a.m., I gave up and headed to the rim. The canyon was eerily quiet. No wind, no animal sounds. Even the constant gurgle of the Colorado River far below seemed muted. The stars were brilliant, but wrong somehow, as if they were arranged in patterns I didn't recognize. At 2:45 a.m., I positioned myself near the Bright Angel trailhead, waiting. At exactly 3 a.m., the transformation began. Not just at one spot, but everywhere I could see. The entire canyon wall shimmered, revealing dozens of dark crystalline formations, doorways, passages. The Grand Canyon wasn't just host to a few thresholds. The entire canyon was one massive threshold, usually dormant, but waking up. And they emerged. The threshold beings, dozens of them, walked out of the passages as if the crystalline transformation that marked them was a key rather than a prison. They moved with purpose, spreading out along the rim, taking positions at specific points. One approached me, Marcus Webb, half human, half crystal, his one normal eye sad but determined. "You need to understand," he said, his voice layered with harmonics that shouldn't come from a human throat. "We didn't choose this, but we've accepted it. We're the bridge between worlds now. Tomorrow, when the barrier fails, we're the only ones who can navigate both sides. The barrier will fail. It's already failing, has been for years. Every person who enters a threshold weakens it a little more. Every photograph, every measurement, every moment of observation collapses the quantum uncertainty that keeps the world separate." He gestured to the canyon. "Your people turned this sacred place into a tourist destination. 12 million observers a year, all looking at something that was meant to be hidden. You've been eroding the barrier just by watching." "Then help us strengthen it," I pleaded. "We are," he said, "but not in the way you think." He explained their plan. The threshold beings would position themselves at key points around the canyon. When the equinox moment arrived, 3:33 a.m., when the balance between day and night was perfect, they would act as conductors, channeling the emergence through themselves rather than letting it run wild. "We'll direct it," Marcus said. "Control it, transform it from an invasion into something else." "Into what?" "A reunion. The third world beings aren't monsters, Ranger Yazzie. They're the parts of ourselves we left behind when we emerged into this world. Our shadows, our dreams, our potential selves." The Hopi stories got it partly right. There was an emergence. But they didn't mention that we split ourselves to do it, leaving half of our nature in the world below. "You're saying these things trying to come through are us? Past us, future us, alternative us. When humans climbed into this fourth world, we chose a specific timeline, a specific reality. But all the other possibilities, all the paths not taken, remained below, and they want to reunite." I thought about the videos, the figures with black eyes. The threshold beings. You're merged with them already. "Partially. Incompletely. Tomorrow, if we do this right, the merger will be complete. Humanity will be whole for the first time since the emergence. And if you do it wrong," Marcus's crystalline half seemed to pulse with dark light, "then two incompatible realities try to occupy the same space, and the paradox tears everything apart. The canyon collapses, possibly taking most of Arizona with it." I ran back to the command center, breathless, trying to explain what I'd learned. The debate was fierce. Could we trust the threshold beings? Did we have a choice? The readings were getting worse by the hour. Dimensional stress was approaching critical levels. "We need to evacuate," someone suggested. "Clear everyone out of a 100-mile radius." "And tell them what?" Tom countered. "That reality is about to break?" Samuel had been quiet, but now he spoke. "The threshold beings are right about one thing. The stories of emergence are incomplete. But my grandfather's grandfather knew more. He spoke of a time when humanity would face a choice: remain divided and safe, or reunite and become something new. The choice was always going to come. We just happened to be the generation that faces it." Dr. Vogel's instruments started screaming. "Something's happening." Massive energy buildup at all threshold points. On the monitors, we could see the passages glowing brighter. The threshold beings were taking their positions, standing at precise points around the canyon rim. And in the depths of the canyon itself, lights were appearing, not electric lights, but something older, organic, like bioluminescence, but wrong. "It's starting early," Vogel said, checking her readings. "The equinox moment isn't for another 3 hours, but the barrier is already critical." That's when we heard it. A sound that came from everywhere and nowhere, from below and above simultaneously. It wasn't quite a voice, wasn't quite music, wasn't quite anything that should exist. It was the sound of something vast trying to squeeze through a space too small for it. The monitors showed chaos. Tourists who'd ignored the evacuation orders were filming as the canyon walls began to pulse like living tissue. The Colorado River far below was glowing. Its water turned into something that looked like liquid light. And emerging from every threshold, figures that hurt to perceive, human-shaped but wrong, as if someone had tried to draw a person from memory but got the proportions off. Third world beings, Samuel said quietly. Our shadow selves. They weren't attacking. They were just standing there, millions of them, filling the canyon, looking up at us with eyes that reflected not light, but possibility. Each one was unique yet familiar, like seeing yourself in a dream where you're someone else. I looked at the monitors showing the threshold beings. Marcus and the others had linked hands, forming a chain around the entire canyon rim. The crystalline parts of their bodies were glowing, pulsing in rhythm with the sound from below. "They're doing it," Vogel said, her voice filled with awe and terror. "They're actually channeling it. Look at the readings. The dimensional stress is stabilizing, but the effort was killing them. On the screens, we could see the threshold beings beginning to fracture, cracks appearing in their crystalline parts, spreading like breaking glass. They were using themselves as a filter, taking the raw chaos of two realities trying to merge and giving it structure, purpose, direction. Marcus's voice came through the radio, distorted but recognizable. Ranger Yazzie. "David, you need to make a choice. We can hold this, complete the merger safely, but we need an anchor on your side. Someone fully human to accept what's happening, to choose it. Without that, we're just delaying the inevitable." "What kind of choice?" I asked into the radio. "Whether humanity stays as it is, limited, safe, incomplete, or becomes what it was meant to be, whole, dangerous, unlimited. The choice your ancestors made at the first emergence, but in reverse." I looked around the command center at my colleagues, at the monitors showing the impossible scene outside. The decision wasn't just mine to make, but somehow I knew it had to start with someone. The observer who chooses which reality collapses into being. If we merge, what happens to us? "You become like us," Marcus replied, his voice growing weaker, able to see all timelines, exist in multiple states, perceive reality as it truly is rather than the narrow slice your current senses show you. But not everyone merged successfully. Some people, those too rigid in their thinking, too afraid of change, rejected their shadow selves. They remained singular, limited, but safe in their limitations. They would never see the canyon as we now saw it. To them, it would always be just a big hole in the ground. Others merged too completely, losing themselves in the infinite possibilities. They became catatonic. Their consciousness spread across too many timelines to function in any single one. We found 12 people in this state around the rim. They were alive, but unreachable, experiencing all of existence simultaneously. The majority of us found a balance. We could perceive multiple timelines, but choose to focus on one. We could see the shadows of other possibilities, but remain grounded in our chosen present. We were human, but more than human. Fourth world beings who had reclaimed our third world heritage. As the sun rose on September 22nd, the autumn equinox, the Grand Canyon looked different. Not to everyone, most tourists would still see the same vista they'd always seen. But to those of us who had merged, who had accepted the integration, it was alive with possibility. Every rock face showed not just what was, but what could be. Every shadow held the promise of paths untaken. Every echo carried voices from timelines that ran parallel to our own. The Park Service, of course, covered it up. The official story was that a hallucinogenic gas leak from an old mining operation had caused mass hysteria. The videos were dismissed as hoaxes or misidentified natural phenomena. The missing people were explained away with various mundane stories. But the truth spread anyway, as truth does. In whispers, in dreams, in moments of clarity that came to people standing at the rim. The Grand Canyon became a pilgrimage site for those seeking integration, seeking wholeness. Most didn't find it the moment of mass merger had passed. But some, those naturally sensitive to the thin places between worlds, could still sense what had happened. The thresholds still exist, but they're different now. They're not traps or passages to another world. They're mirrors, showing us all the selves we could be. People still disappear into them sometimes, but now we know they're not lost. They're exploring, experiencing, existing in multiple states simultaneously. Some come back. Some choose to stay in the in-between. Some become guides for others, like the threshold beings once were. I remained a ranger for another year, helping people understand what they were experiencing when they felt the canyon calling to them. But eventually, I had to leave. My perception had expanded too much to maintain the illusion of normal life. I could see every timeline where I stayed, where I left, where I never existed at all. It was beautiful and maddening. Dr. Vogel went on to win a Nobel Prize for her work on quantum consciousness, though she could never fully explain how she'd made her discoveries. Tom Harrison retired early, unable to reconcile his new perception with the demands of bureaucracy. Janet Morrison became the new keeper of the secret archives, documenting the experiences of those who had merged. Samuel Tawahongva returned to his people with a new version of the old stories, preparing them for a world where the boundaries between possible and actual were no longer firm. And the Grand Canyon itself, it remains what it has always been, a wound in the earth where the deep truths are visible. But now, it's also a scar, marking the place where humanity chose to heal itself by accepting its own shadow. Some nights, when the conditions are right, you can still see them. The threshold beings who sacrifice themselves for our choice. They appear as lights in the canyon, forming patterns that spell out warnings or welcomes, depending on your perspective. They're not ghosts. They're echoes, reminders of the price of transformation. If you visit the Grand Canyon and you feel something calling to you from the depths, something that suggests you're more than you think you are, don't be afraid. But also, don't take it lightly. The integration is a gift, but it's also a burden. Once you see all the possibilities, you can never again pretend that your single chosen path is the only one that matters. The trail that doesn't exist is still there, appearing between 3 and 4 a.m. on certain nights. But now we know what it really is. Not a trap or a passage, but an invitation. An invitation to become whole, to reclaim what you left behind, to see reality as it truly is, rather than as we've agreed to pretend it is. Most people decline the invitation. They take their photos, buy their t-shirts, and leave, satisfied with the surface beauty of the canyon. And that's okay. Not everyone is ready to see behind the veil, but for those who are ready, who feel the pull of possibility, who sense that they're living as only half of themselves, the Grand Canyon waits. Patient, eternal. A testament to the moment when humanity was offered a choice between safety and completeness, and for once chose completeness. The irony is that I'm recording this warning, telling you to be careful, to stay away from the thresholds, even as I know that warnings won't stop those who are meant to find them. Because that's how it works now. The canyon calls to those who have shadow selves strong enough to reunite with. It ignores those who are already whole or too fragmented to merge. So, if you're watching this, if you've made it this far, ask yourself, do you feel incomplete? Do you dream of lives you've never lived? Do you sometimes feel like you're only experiencing a fraction of who you really are? If the answer is yes, the Grand Canyon is waiting for you. The trail that doesn't exist will appear for you. The choice will be offered. What you do with that choice is up to you, or rather, it's up to all the versions of you, collapsed into a single moment of decision. Time isn't a line, it's a web. And at the Grand Canyon, you can choose to see the entire web instead of just the strand you're walking on. But be warned, once you see it, you can never unsee it. Once you merge with your shadow selves, you can never again be singular. Once you accept the invitation, you become part of the canyon story forever. The Grand Canyon isn't just a place, it's a choice, a challenge, a mirror, and it's waiting for you to decide who you really are, or who you all are. Because in the end, that's what the trail that doesn't exist really leads to. Not a place, but a state of being. Not a destination, but an integration. The question is, are you brave enough to walk it? Ranger David Yazzie resigned from the National Park Service in September 2022. His current whereabouts are classified, though reports suggest he may be working with indigenous communities to document and preserve knowledge about thin places throughout North America. The Grand Canyon continues to report an average of 12 deaths and 900-plus search and rescue operations per year. The causes are typically listed as dehydration, falls, and medical emergencies. The number of unexplained disappearances remains classified. If you experience unusual phenomena while visiting the Grand Canyon, do not attempt to investigate. Report any sightings to park rangers immediately. Remember, not all trails are meant to be walked. Not all choices are meant to be made. But sometimes, the canyon chooses for you.